Gunakchish di Kian Kawu, Gunakchish Hashaganya, Gunakchish Hashuka, Gunakchish Sakwamish, Ha'ani. I thank the Creator, I thank the Great Spirit, I thank our ancestors, and the Saquamish people that we can gather here on their sacred land. Plinuksi Nyuhat du Asak, Yishbuwada Ayachat, Kiksadi Yadi Hatsati, Seat Kwe Di Dachfunk, Atli Yekadi Kla, Nanyayi, Stakin Kwan Ayachat. My name is Sweetwater Nannauck. I'm from the Killiwell clan of the Tsimshian Nation. My father is from the Raven Frog clan of the Tlingit Nation. I am the grandchild of the Glacier People clan, and my great-grandmother was the precious grandchild of the Nanyai, the Upper Living People clan of the Stikine River. And I'm a direct descendant of Chief Nannauck and Chief Shakes from Alaska. I'm the director of Idle No More Washington. Thank you all for being here and coming with your open hearts and minds and coming to do this good work here that we can carry forward in a good way. So I appreciate it very much. You can be here and share with us. I want to introduce to you my partner here in presentations too. Here is Che, and I would like have him introduce himself, and he's going to give us a little short presentation before I get started. So thank you. I raise my hands to you.
Hello, my name is Che. My family comes from a land called Korea. I met Sweetwater a while back through some of our work and our activism together, and she's given me this opportunity. Learning more about my history and my people and where I come from, how their family changed my life. I realized that Korean people, before they got colonized by Japan and then the U.S., which is currently like a neo-colony right now, my people also follow these indigenous beliefs. A lot of people think it was just Buddhist, but actually Korean history has over 8,000 years. And for over 6,000 years before Buddhism even entered our lands, we actually share the same beliefs as indigenous people. And my people, like many people here in the world, have forgotten where they come from, and knowing who you are and where you come from is so important. A teacher once told me, she was giving some presentation to some students, and they were like, why do we need to know this stuff? Why does it matter? And then she said, well, everybody came from their home, right? Everybody has a home. But if you didn't know where you come from, how could you get back there, right? So we all came here. Most of you probably don't live on this conference center, but all of you guys are going to go home. So knowing where you come from is so vital. So my talk today is mostly about this one idea called the Indigenous Mind. And so I'll explain more about what the Indigenous Mind is, but first to give some context. So we live in a time of globalization, and what that means is that we're no longer bound by nation states or culture or even language. You have people from all over the world speaking all these different languages, and just even looking at the food that we eat, it's like you can eat food from all over the world, just even in a place like Seattle or the Northwest. And so we're really trying to think about what does it mean to live in a world that is no longer bound, that's totally globalized. But first, we need to think about our context. American history, the foundation of American history is racism. For better or worse, it's just the history and it's the past. The genocide of natives and the enslavement of Africans. And that's something that we still struggle with to this day, as natives are still mistreated and exploited, and black people are still enslaved. There's more black people in prisons, which are basically modern slaves, than there were on this plantation. So we really need to think about we really need to rethink what we mean by progress and making moves forward. And of course, there's imperialism. It's going all around the world. The U.S. has over I think it was last time I read, over 190 military bases in over 80 different countries worldwide. And they do it from economic to cultural to political to educational, all areas of people activity. They're just forcing their beliefs on them. And so I call all this stuff colonialism. And classically, it happened through the Bible or the bullet. And that's really part and parcel of the same system. So for example, in my country, where I come from, in Korea, they forced, after creating this huge barrier and killing millions of Korean people, they destroyed a lot of the government leaders who didn't support this new regime change. And my grandfather was actually murdered by the first Korean president. He's Ri Syngman, and he got his PhD by Woodrow Wilson, who is the former president of the United States. So you can see how the very first president of Korea is intimately tied to both Christianity and US imperialism. And my grandfather was actually murdered by Ri Seung-min and the US regime that took over. And of course, colonialism takes many forms. So, sweatshops all over the world, my people are enslaved all over. And the clothes that we wear, the food that we eat, the nice technology things that we have, that is part of this colonization. And that happens globally, and we're not disconnected from it. Even if we were to turn a blind eye, it's still there and it's still happening. And beyond colonialism, people think this is past. So a term that's come up is neocolonialism. So you have, classically it's like white people with business suits or whatever, doing colonialism. But now you have people that are being oppressed, oppressing themselves. So even in my own community, I have Korean people or Asian people and oppressing other Asian people or other black people, other Latinos, right? So it's really it's a changing face, but the dynamic is still the same. So another way is the military imperialism. These are neo-colonies. They destroy countries, and then they extract resources from them. Another way is to the dollar, through capitalism. So I don't know if you guys heard the news recently, but Greece just refused to pay back like over $1 billion or something to the IMF. And we can clap at that, right? But the thing is, where does that value come from? So the dollar represents labor. It represents the blood, sweat, and tears of people. So that $1 billion that they're not paying is value that was extracted from people that was never given back. That's called slavery, right? When the US owes billions of dollars to China, when we have trillions of dollars in debt that we're not paying back, that represents the enslavement of people. And it's primarily non-white people. It's primarily people of color. And it's primarily to benefit white people. So when we think about capitalism, every time you spend $1, you have to recognize this is the slavery of people. That's what you benefit from. This value that's never repaid back, that's the enslavement of people. And there's more. We have racism, right? It's this idea that one group is better than the other, and it's a global phenomenon, and it always changes. So it's not like science has proven that even the identity of whiteness is something that changes, is unstable over time. So for example, like Jewish people and Italian people were treated poorly because they were classified as non-white. In Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, he explains that the problem with Jews is that they're not white. But nowadays, Jewish people are not considered white. So you can see that this racial classification is not actually biological or just logical at all. It's a system based on power, and it keeps changing over time. And the problem is that it's so unconscious. So I've come up with this idea that you are the problem. Unconscious racism, it's the problem. And it's so difficult to speak about because when we talk about it, people are unaware that it's going on. So it's very difficult and challenging. But going to this, I was told that there'd be a lot of kind of longtime activists, people have a better sense, have a better thing. So this is why I'm explaining this. And this infects everyone, regardless of if you're white or not, it doesn't matter. Like, people have been trained to have this colonial and racist mentality. And what my teachers have told me is that no one is pure anymore. Their minds and their bodies are infected by this, and everybody needs healing, everybody needs understanding, everybody needs to learn and grow and change. And it's not going to happen by just one group doing it. Everybody needs to come together. So these are all these problems that exist in the world, and it's difficult. And it's hard. It's like when you really think about what's going on and how the food that we eat, the air that we breathe, the land that we're standing on is colonized, occupied territory. When the clothes that we wear is made by slavery of other people, it can be very difficult, right? Or at least it should be if you're conscious. And so here's the indigenous mind. So you are the problem, unconscious racism the problem, I'm the answer. Indigenous mind, the answer. And the indigenous mind is the mind that comes from nature. It holds the wisdom of the trees, of the birds. How do salmon know how to travel all the way around the world and then come back to their birthplace, right? It's just this wisdom, intuition that nature has that we also have inside of us. So you learn from nature. That's the nature of the indigenous mind. Albert Einstein, a great scientist, also understood this. He said, look deep into nature, then you will understand everything better. For example, if you think about how a tree works, a tree has this beautiful seed that has this great potential inside, and given the right conditions, it'll grow. And it always grows towards the light. It takes things that are bad in this environment that harms people, like carbon dioxide, and creates things that are beneficial. Oxygen gives life to everything. It also provides wood that people use for like housing and fires and all these things. So the trees are this amazing giving thing that just always responds to its environment and always works harmoniously. And inside it has this seed. So in the same way yourself, each person has this seed inside, these original instructions that we need to cultivate and manifest to put out our own potential. And you see how nature works. It's always in balance. It's always in harmony with each other. And part of the indigenous mind is learning to see. Learn how to see. Realize that everything connects to everything else. And that's the nature of our life in a globalized world. Our actions are really not our own, and our lives are really not our own. Because if we didn't have this system of slavery and colonialism and imperialism, we couldn't support this kind of Western lifestyle now. And now that the world's resources are now being depleted, people are now rushing only out of necessity to change this. But this has always been the case, regardless of if you see it or not. So it's learning to see deeply beyond the surface of things. You know, this is an exercise. I'm an artist and educator, and we do this exercise with my students, whether it's at a meal or just with everyday things. We'll say, try to trace this back to the earth, because ultimately everything comes from that place. So think about this laptop right here. This is made of metal and plastic that's made from petroleum and oil and from metals. And then they were mined, in other countries, and they were shipped all across the world. But even something like technology and computers and cars, these actually still come from the earth. So it's learning to see deeply in that connection between all things. And on a personal level, it really comes down to practicing seeing your ego. And again, everybody is, no one is pure. Everybody is involved in this. And that's why it's so powerful. So part of it is seeing the racist mentality that everybody carries inside. Just the understanding that we think of race as a real thing to judge ourselves and others already shows the racist mentality, right? So some characteristics are that seeing the self or the group as more important than others, or that my way is the right way. And if you need to justify or rationalize your life, you already know something's wrong. There's also the colonial mentality. And this is really infected everywhere. This idea that we have ownership and control of life, words, people, and resources, that we are somehow above them. But it's not. We are totally dependent on them. And some people are so ignorant and so wrapped up in this mentality that until disaster strikes, they won't change. But I'm really hoping that people here have a higher level of consciousness and understanding and can come together for good things. And to self-centeredness, ignoring our own ignorance. The amount that we see and perceive is so small compared to what's out there. If you just think about how many people are in the world, not even nature yet, but just people, there are 7 billion people. How many people do we know in our lifetime? Even if we're the smartest person, the wisest person with the most understanding, we combine all our knowledge about people, we still don't even see the tip of the iceberg. Right? So ignorance is a natural state of life, and you should be sensitive to it. You should embrace your ignorance. That's how you learn. And in order to change, to really change, not just feel good or have an excitement or play around with good ideas, but to really change as a person, to really change how you live on this earth and your impact there, you constantly need to practice. And just, I also do life coaching, and this is something that I've learned. I've used it on myself, my clients and stuff, and it really helps. But in this context, it's seeing the racist and colonial self. You need to see that mentality in yourself. If you don't see that's there, you are not going to get rid of it. And this is why it's primarily unconscious. And then, if you get a little bit of awakening, you can become subconscious, and you become more and more aware, you'll see it very often. So you need to see this and be aware of this. But it's not enough just to see it and then to feel bad or good or justify or whatever or feel defensive. It's really about seeing it when it's in action, because our actions solidify our habits. So first you need to be aware, and then you see when it's in action. And then you need to change your action to a beneficial habit. Right? It's pretty simple, but it takes a constant state of self-awareness and reflection and change. It's a constant practice. It's not enough to be good to the environment or recycle one time. You need to change fundamentally how you relate to the earth, how you relate to people. And that's what's going to create real change. And of course, you need to repeat as necessary until racism and colonialism are over. And I believe that it can happen in our lifetime. Well, at least my lifetime. Just kidding. Another thing about the indigenous mind is that if you respect your Mother Earth, we literally get everything from the earth. Everything we see, feel, hear, touch, depend on comes from the earth. And people have been disconnected from it. But even if you're ignorant of it, it doesn't matter. You still depend on the earth for all your resources. So this is a quote from Indigenous knowledge, is, "When the blood in your vein returns to the sea, and the earth in your bones return to the ground, perhaps then you will remember that this land does not belong to you. It is you who belongs to this land." This idea of ownership doesn't make sense. How can you own something that outlives you? It's like if you have a pet, how can this pet own you? This pet will die and you'll still live on, right? So really respecting that connection to the earth, because it's actually, we're dependent on it. And to not respect it is literally suicide, because if you kill the very thing that gives you life, you also will die. So this is just, it's understanding that connection there. And then the last point is equality. And equality is a very, very radical principle that many people don't fully understand, even though most people will agree and say that they embrace it. So in mathematics, it's x equals y. And what that means is that x is not y. They're two completely different things. So for example, me versus you and the person next to you, completely different in the form. But at the fundamental level, you have the same value. So it's being able to see that with all people. And you can never look at someone and prove equality. You can't look at someone and say, oh, because of this, because of that, we are now equal. It's so radical because you actually must believe it in your heart and already know it. So for example, you must recognize that these 7 billion people in the world, they're all equal in value to you, even if you have no idea what their life is like. And even just carrying around that consciousness, it can be a very big burden, but it's the truth, right? And the truth can be difficult if you're living outside of it. And part of the indigenous mind is about silence and wisdom. If you look at nature, it only makes a big thunder or big roar once in a while. But most of the time, it's very peaceful. And in the same way, our minds, when we're at peace and we're calm, we can also grow and nurture ourselves. Our own intuition, our own potential can grow naturally. It does not require many words to speak the truth. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the world. It can be good and bad. So breathe easy and be aware. So-bi-ba is a song, this idea, and this lesson that I teach. It just means S-O is so, breathe easy is breathe easy, and be aware is be aware. Or B-A is be aware, so so-bi-ba. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Che. So, thank you all for being here. I'm going over briefly of the colonialism in regards to Native people. It originally started in 1493, 1452 from Papal Bulls. And they declared war against all non-Christians throughout the world, sanctioning, promoting the conquest, colonization, and exploitation of all non-Christian nations and their territories. These Papal Bulls gave rise to the doctrine of discovery. And the doctrine of discovery was a foundation for all of the legislation, all the colonization, all the policy that was to follow. And with that, the Native Americans experienced extreme genocide, and the UN has defined genocide as an act committed with the idea of destroying the whole or in part a nation, ethnic, racial, or religious group, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily harm, deliberately inflicting conditions calculated to physically destroy the group, and forcefully transferring the children of that group to another group. So with this colonization continued on into the manifest destiny. And so with that, they continue to take away our land, our way of life, our culture, and our spiritual ways of living. I'll go over briefly just a few of these. There's many that have happened over the years, but I'm giving an overview. How many have taken this workshop before? All right, okay, thank you. So they were outlining our spiritual way, because our spirituality is our power. And I think that was a lot of the main focus for us. I mean, that is still true today. So, and a lot of the work I do is spiritual activism, so I'll be focusing a lot on that. And taking away our spiritual power, forbidding us to practice our traditional ways of singing, dancing, praying. You know, that was suppressed even up until 1978 with the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. The next thing was disconnect us from the land, taking us from our land, because we have a very strong and spiritual connection to the land. The way I introduced myself, I told you exactly where I came from.
And so by removing that, that's like taking away our identity and who we are and our connection to that. So for us, the land is sacred. Then that continued on to the Americanization policies, taking away our ways of governance. In our traditional societies, we had clan leaders. Our women had a lot of power. So instead, they made us adopt written constitutions and elected tribal officials. And I mean, even in Alaska, we have great respect still for our clan leaders, and they do all our traditional ceremonies and work too. We also have our elected officials, but our real powers, we know and remember and acknowledge those who have, it's been passed on to them. So one of my favorite poets and visionaries of our time was John Trudell. He said, "The great lie is that this is civilization. It's not civilized. It has literally been the most bloodthirsty, brutalizing system ever imposed upon this planet. This is not civilization. This is the great lie." Or if it does represent civilization, and that is truly what civilization is, then the great lie is that civilization is good for us, because it's not. We know that. We're all, I asked an elder about this, a colonization, and Phil Lucas is a filmmaker, and he did this great documentary about it. I said, well, what happened to the colonizers when they came here? He said, the colonizers have become colonized. And so as my young brother here is talking about, that we have to, it's decolonizations ourselves, and we're all a part of that process. And for us, the Native people, it's remembering who we are and where we come from. Remember our spiritual and traditional values. So I'll talk briefly about historical trauma. So all this led up to the historical trauma. And I'm telling all of you this because if you're wanting to work with Native people, these are the things you need to know in working with us, and what is impacting us, and what is some of the challenges for us to continue to do this work. So historical trauma is multi-generational trauma experienced by specific cultural groups, their descendants. It is both cumulative and collective. And so even if I haven't experienced the trauma, what my ancestors have, that is passed on to me and on to all of us. Actually, all of our ancestors have experienced this trauma at one time or another. And without realizing it, that's a lot of the work we have to do today. So symptoms of historical trauma is, the high rates of suicide, homicide, domestic violence, child abuse, all the probably what typical people think of as stereotypes of Native people, but it's actually just a result of this historical trauma passed on to us. But we can heal from it. There is a healing process, and I want to lead us through some of that work here today. Because I found to do the work, we need to first work on our own selves. What's happening to the earth has happened to us. That pain and suffering the earth is feeling because of what we've done and our ancestors have. That healing is what we can do. And we heal ourselves, we help heal the earth too. And the key to healing from historical trauma is remembering who we are, is remembering our community's original instructions, and allowing ourselves to feel that pain, express it, and let it go. And it's hard, it's not easy. I've been doing a lot of this work with many other people. I do traditional healing also, and it's a very painful but powerful process. So, and what tools I will give to you is to help you, that you can work on your own too. When you leave here, if you do meditations, you'll be able to do this work too. Not just for you, because the healing we do is not just for us, but our children, our children's children. We can help our family to heal in the earth. So we will transcend that trauma by releasing it. We can see ourselves as survivors instead of victims. And we're restoring our original instructions, what our ancestors have taught us and have passed on and kept alive and real for us. So at this time, I'd like to take a few minutes. I want you to pair up with somebody, and we're going to talk about either our historical trauma or historical oppression. So examples of historical oppression are, say, maybe your ancestors came from the Midwest before they moved here. They probably benefited from the land grab. Or maybe they moved here from the East Coast and moved out here, and Everett was where all the trees, all the old growth trees were cut down and shipped out of Everett. And so there's some historical oppression too that our ancestors have contributed. So if you can, please pair up with a person, and we would like to talk a few minutes to each other about your family's historical trauma or historical oppression. So I want you, so we're going to do a group meditation, and I'll help lead you through that. So I want you to think about everything you shared with your partner, and then if there's like one or two main things that you would like to work on today in regards to your ancestors, their pain and their healing process. And we'll do this all together. Me and Che, we prepared for this work already. We did some good prayers and meditation. And we called our ancestors out there singing, calling them in to help us to do this work. So thank you. So just kind of relax and close your eyes. And let's do this work together. I'm going to count from 3, 3, 3. And your body is relaxed. You feel your chair, you feel your feet in the ground. You feel your heart beating. And count from 2, 2, 2. And your mind is relaxed. Your consciousness and unconsciousness, collective consciousness, our dream time, is all connected to the greater consciousness of the universe and the Creator. And count from 1, 1, 1. And our spirit is relaxed. Our soul is relaxed. We're rooted and grounded in Mother Earth. Our spirit is lifted up high to the Creator. We call our ancestors. We pray for their healing and blessings today for this work to be done. Now, I want you to see what happened to your ancestors and feel that pain. We'll just slowly go into it, that they have suffered. You can see the person maybe who had harmed them. We're in a safe place. It's okay to see and feel that pain, that fear, and acknowledge it so we can let it go. See it as it actually happened. Because you are your ancestor. Now it's like we're going to rewind that. But this time I want you to see them as animals. If you have a totem animal, see your ancestor as that. I use the grizzly bear because that's my family's spirit animal. And see the other person who harmed them as a scary animal. But in that scary animal, it's a dark, dark spirit. And their only intention is harm. And they do not know the light and love. And they operate from an unconscious pain and suffering that has happened to them. But that bear spirit, or your family's animals, has a clan, has a family. And they surround them and they pray for them and send them light and love to the animals who is in pain and suffering and doesn't know the light and love. And they just send light to his heart. They send forgiveness and blessing and healing. And then that scary animal realizes what he does is wrong. And he stops. And he asks your ancestors for forgiveness. He's sorry. Your ancestor, the bear, whatever animal you've chosen, forgives them. And they embrace and know that we are one and know that we are brothers and sisters. And we break that cycle for us and for the next generations to come, for our family, our loved ones, and we send that prayer out to the rest of the world where that pain and trauma happened, and clearing it out. We send that love and light to other people who may have also suffered that pain too. Those who are alone, those who are hurt, those who are lost and sick, that they may receive that blessings too. Now we come back. Our very DNA is changed. We receive that light and love and healing. We feel it grounded in our body, down to Mother Earth, and we have a stronger connection to Mother Earth, to Grandfather Sun, Grandmother Moon, the whole universe. And remember who we are and our connection to all of life, and all of life is sacred. We count from 10 to 1. We'll slowly come back out of this. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Yeah, well, so be it. Thank you. So, I don't know if you want to have time to discuss what you've seen or feel. Did people experience that meditation? Well, let's continue on. Because this healing process is important. If you're going to work with Native people, that healing has to come from within you and from within us. This healing, this historical trauma, will strengthen us to do our work and our purpose. And we're all here to do what we came and said we would do here on this Mother Earth. So by doing this healing, we can continue on in a good way, firmly planted in our purpose and our work here. Because Native people, we've never been idle. We've been fighting with the colonizers since they've come to our shores. And for every right we have, we've had to fight for. And we continue to this day. And so I appreciate your support. And just know that our tribal sovereignty rights may be our last chance to help save us all. I know Swinomish is up there fighting with BNSF. The Lummi are exerting their treaty rights too to stop the coal terminal on their sacred burial ground. So we need your support. We need to work together. And that's what I'm here to do, and not just for us, the next generations. That's why I'm working with our younger generation to train them up to do things and continue this work. And many of you may know Billy Frank. Billy Frank Jr. was a Nisqually elder, been fighting for the salmon rights, and he's been arrested over 50 times. He was an amazing man. Yeah, I even had a dream about him on, actually it was his birthday. I didn't know it was his birthday. I start writing down my dreams, and it was March 9th. And I had this quote here, and I wrote a proposal. I'm working on teaching, having Native youth action camps, and I wrote this as part of the proposal. And he said, as the salmon disappear, so do our tribal cultures and treaty rights. We are at a crossroads, and we are running out of time. And so the dream I had on March 9th, I dreamt I went into this bakery. There are these two big bakers in white outfits and stuff and a hat. And they pulled out a big cookie sheet, big huge sheet. And they held it up for me to look at and see. And on it, there was 40 little bread rolls that they took out of the oven. But it spelled out, save the salmon. I'm like, okay, Uncle, this is a direct message. I guess it's... So, as you start your healing process, you'll get some messages too. So it's really important that we continue to do this work and build bridges and alliances, because we're at this crucial time. It's been prophesied by many Indigenous people. The Anishinaabe have a great prophecy about it that I like to share. You know, it's called the lighting the seventh fire. And I'll just briefly read some of it. This comes from Tom Dostu on July 11th, the year 2000. He said, the seventh and final prophet came to the Anishinaabe with a message directly for the light-skinned race. At the time of the seventh fire, a new people will emerge. They will retrace the footsteps of their ancestors, and they will try to find those things which have been lost along the way. They will approach the elders in search of guidance. The new generation must be fearless in their quest. The light-skinned race will be at a crossroads. If they continue down the road of materialism, it will be to their destruction and for all humanity as well. But if the light-skinned race choose to join with the natural people of this land on the spiritual path, then they will again have the chance to create a nation, the greatest spiritual nation ever to have existed. Two other races will join these two races. Together, they will come together and light the eighth and final fire, an eternal fire of peace, harmony, brotherhood, and sisterhood. And that choice is in our hands. So we're here today to light that seventh fire and continue on that spiritual path. I want to share with you some of what it means for me, why the spiritual activism I do is has a foundation of the cultural aspects that I carry forward in all the work and actions that I do. Because as I said before, earlier I was introducing this, because we need the inner revolution connected to the outer revolution. And it's time for the activist people to become spiritual and the spiritual people to become active. Yeah, I met Clayton when I was in New York at the Climate March, and so it was great to see him there. But I just want to share with you a few things that makes, that is unique to a lot of our Indigenous movements today. And what I'm sharing with you is from our tribal elders, the Tlingit people, that they got together and wrote down what are our values that we need to make sure we pass on to the next generation, so they give them strength and guidance. That we are the stewards of the air, land, and sea. And I told you before that our connection to the earth and our land is at a deep and spiritual level. It's knowing who we are, our place of origin. I told you exactly where I come from. And I've been always told never to forget that. It's our Tlingit, it's our hakusti'i, we call it, our Tlingit way of life. It's a way of being and living. Because as the stewards, we are called to protect our Salish Sea. And so I thank you. Some of you have come here and continue this work in a good way. So it's an honor to be a part of this work here together. Much of the work, as I said, is based on our spirituality, our connection, reverence for the Creator. And never forgetting that everything that we do is in song and and prayer and ceremony. In all my I Don't Know More actions, it always starts out with prayer. Everything always starts out in prayer, singing, drumming, calling the ancestors, because that's where our spiritual strength lies. And with that, we can, it's knowing that all life is sacred, the water is sacred, everything is sacred. And so that's what we're trying to convey, and asking our people and loved ones to dear ones here to join us in this path, in this work, because it's not easy, it's never ending. We have discipline and obedience to the traditions of our ancestors. We respect protocols. Every time I have an action, I always go to the original peoples of the land. If I'm in Seattle, I talk to the Duwamish, Suquamish, Muckleshoot. If I'm down in Olympia, I contact the Nisqually. So wherever I go, that's where I'm going for guidance. Because the way of organizing is much different. And sometimes it's kind of hard to teach that. Because the way I organize, I pray about everything, and it will come to me on what to do. Every step of the way. Like I'm working on organizing Native youth action camps, and so every day as I'm praying, it's like, oh, ask these people to come, ask them to speak, ask them to partake in this. So it's not, it's in the conventional way. Sometimes I'll be asked to collaborate with my non-Native friends, and they want to invite me. Oh, we're having a meeting on Thursday. I said, I don't go to meetings. I barely do email, and no conference calls either. I said, what do you want me to do? And I might show up. I might help support that. But our way of organizing is much different. And then, I was talking to one of the organizers here too, and she's like, tired and a lot of work, but the day of, when it's happening, it just flows. So why not just go with the flow throughout the day-to-day process of organizing? That's what we all can do, and that's what I'm trying to hear, and I'm doing here to share with you. We think in terms of the next 7 generations. And this was in Seattle. We all know about the Arctic drilling and Shell heading up there. I mean, even their colonial name tags of the Noble Explorer, and what is the other one? Polar Pioneer. Oh my gosh. It's just, it's the same old ship coming in. It's a repeat, they say history repeats itself, and that's what's happening. I call it corporate colonization. And that's what's happening to all of us. That's why we all have to come together and do this. And that's what's been prophesied. That's why we're here. And some of the things of organizing too is letting Native take the lead. And that's another challenge I see happening too. So in all my events, I organize them, and I invite my allies and friends to come and partake too. But I'm the one organizing that. I'm the one praying and getting guidance for that. So that's, and many times in the collaborations with non-natives, they want to organize everything and then have us come sing and drum. And that's not right. Because, I'm not your token Indian. That's... So we come together, and remembering all the reasons why we're here. Many of you are been longtime activists and organizers, and I thank you for that good work. You had good teachings that got you on this path, or things that happened along the way. That what we're facing here now are, as you know, the coal and oil transport, and the trains, the terminals, and so that's what a lot of my focus is doing today, and that's I feel like besides the Arctic, that's some of the main stuff. I'm originally from Alaska, and one of my ancestors, William Paul, was the first Native attorney in Alaska, and when they discovered oil up there, he went up there to represent them. We had an elder from the Arctic back in May I told him that was my grandfather. He said, oh, I met him when I was a young man. He was our first attorney. So I come from a long line of who, you know, we don't call them activists. I'm a protector, a land defender. So, but it's good that we continue that fight. And I tell people, there was somebody interviewing me when I did an action. They said, what are you going to tell people, those who are walking by, who are just carrying on their day-to-day life and not really caring about what's happening to the earth? And I told them that story about my ancestors. I said, they've been fighting for the last over 500 years for our rights. And I told them the latest from about Shell. And I said, what are you going to tell your children and grandchildren 50 years from now? What did you do to make a change at this crucial time when the starfish, the salmon, the seals, everything is dying? That there's the rising sea levels, you know, and the warming oceans. Even then they have dolphins up in the Arctic that the polar bears are eating, you know. And Alaska was some of the first climate change refugees too. Because of the rising sea levels, entire communities are going to have to move. So, you know, we're really at such a pivotal point now to make a great change for us and the future generations of this world. That one day our children will thank us, our grandchildren will thank us that we stood up and did something. So I appreciate that with each and every one of you. Because it's not just an Indian thing, it's everybody's thing, you know. So I'm thankful for that. I'm grateful that we can be here. And this time, I ask you to join me to be idle no more. I'd like to share in some things with you now too. I want you to pair up with somebody again. And what we're going to do is we'll give you like 5 minutes each. Is that good? And I want you to tell them maybe there's something you learned or you're doing now or something you will do different. What are you going to do to change the world? The other person's job is just to listen. And when they are done, they will just affirm and acknowledge what you said and say things, you know, like I like to say, like, I see you doing good things, living in a world of clean water, and connecting with like-minded people, living in a supportive and healthy environment, eating healthy foods, living in, you know, we're going to bring into fruition this new world, and that's what we are here to do. So let's take a few minutes. I'll give 5 for one to talk to the other one just affirm it in a few minutes. So, and you can choose partners, different partners if you want. So the other person actively listens. You know, sometimes a lot of times people will talk. So what I do to actively listen, when people are talking, I repeat in my mind everything they're saying. And a lot of times they're not really listening. They're waiting for when they're done talking so they can jump in and say what they want to say. So they're not actually listening that well. So this will help with your active listening skills and to acknowledge and to lift somebody else up and hold them in their truth and what they're here to do. Because we're witnessing, we're acknowledging that that we're here to do a specific purpose. So do we have all that? Okay, let's give you 5 minutes, the first person. That's the heartbeat. In my heart beats the drums of eternity. Thank you for sharing and lifting each other up and listening in a good way and telling your partner and seeing them and envisioning them doing this good work. So we're rounding up here. I'm going to ask my brother Che to sing a song for us, and I'm going to finish up with a Women's Warrior song. So I'm going to finish up with the Women's Warrior song. This song was composed by Martina Pierre of the Lillooet Nation up in Canada. Came to her in the Sweat Lodge. And so the first round is prayers for Mother Earth. The second round is prayers for the women. The third round is prayers for our friends and family. And the fourth round is our prayers for our ancestors. And it's just a song to remind you to tread lightly here on this land, because our ancestors, they gave their lives and their blood was spilled, and they loved and cherished this land. So I want to remind you to also love and cherish it. And the fifth round is we hold up our hand, and those are to give us strength. And if you catch on some of the songs, you can join me, but I just ask you not to sing it in other places. It belongs to, as I said, Martina Pierre.
Should we turn off the cameras? Or
Yeah, you probably could turn off the cameras.